Amanda was 29 when she was convicted of felony possession. This would be her first conviction, which resulted in her shortest prison stint, about 10 months. The charge was having marijuana in her car just before it was decriminalized in Oregon. During her incarceration at Coffee Creek, she saw the service dogs and their handlers. It felt odd walking down the echoing halls, surrounded by bars and wire-reinforced glass. Everyone is dressed in dark navy prison blue, and among all this uniformity and cleanliness, there are dogs being guided through the halls. Like four-legged slices of normality being walked through a concrete nightmare. And not just any dogs. Golden retrievers, Labradors, shepherds, beautiful mountain dogs, like the ones Amanda grew up with on her family farm in Hood River. There was no point in applying to the dog program, though. She wouldn't be behind bars long enough to raise a puppy. At least she didn't think she would. After Amanda was released, she tried to clean up her life. There wasn't much to clean up, honestly. Amanda wasn't a drug addict before she went inside. She just smoked a little weed on the weekends. But now that she was on parole, she kept her reputation spotless. No alcohol, no drugs, no unnecessary risk. Bosses already don't want to hire a felon, even if the manager at Arby's smokes more weed than you ever did. But Amanda was determined. She believed that building a long, clean work history would wash out any stain. But then there was the opioid epidemic. Amanda wasn't hooked on legal meds. Her roommate was. The year Amanda was convicted again, ironically, was the same year Oregon doctors were audited by the state and found to be overprescribing criminal amounts of hydrocodone. We'll leave a link to the Portland Mercury article if you want to read about it. It was legal. It came with a prescription. But Amanda's roommate still agreed to get rid of it, to go cold turkey with Amanda. They were both on parole, and they made a pact to be each other's watchdog. They decided to throw away anything, legal or illegal, that could lead to trouble. They even included caffeine on their apartment ban list, and wrote a provision that they would drink more water every day. To get rid of the prescription opioids, Amanda's roommate went to a cousin who had broken his kneecap at his part-time job and was still uninsured. He could use the legal hydrocodone, and Amanda and her roommate could cover rent for the month, since Arby's only got them halfway there. Amanda agreed to drive, and the roommate bagged the hydrocodone in its original prescription bag. You probably see where this is going. A woman who was convicted of using marijuana a few years before it was legal got convicted again for facilitating a drug deal. A drug deal involving medication doctors were giving away hand over fist. In the U.S., if you try to use drugs as a currency, you're a felon. Unless you've contributed to a political party recently, then you're a sackler. Regardless, a parole violation can result in up to 24 months in prison. Drug trafficking is 10 years to life. Amanda declined to share the exact length of her sentence at Coffee Creek, but she laughed and said, "I could raise 10 of these dogs, and I'll still be here." When she said it, she was scratching the head of a gorgeous golden retriever with big brown eyes. For context, it takes 2 years for a prisoner to raise a service dog. An episode exploring the ins and outs of service dog training in prisons would be a very short episode. And there are plenty of documentaries and interviews on YouTube about the dog training programs. Instead, we want to talk about the value of redemption for the inmates, for the animals, and for the people receiving the service dogs in the end. We'll start with a few myths. Myth 1. As Americans, we're taught that all criminals should be hungry for redemption. Once they have a felony on their record, They should do whatever work we give them. Should this include companion animals? Myth 2. Why are prisoners raising these dogs in the first place? Shouldn't medical insurance or veteran affairs cover the cost of PTSD animals? Myth 3. Historically, both criminals and soldiers come from low-income families. What's the difference, morally, between the criminal raising the dog and a soldier receiving the dog? We're going to get to our myths, but first I want to ask Joe about his brief time at Coffee Creek.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about morality and the drug war for 2 seconds. It's not that every prisoner in prison is on drug crimes. I think it's like drugs and petty theft and other things. But in your opinion, Todd, when you think about like why people get convicted, are there things that we punish harsher that actually that you think should be less punishable, like that deserve less time?
I think the big one being the legalizing of marijuana. I think the people that, and I think even before, I've never been a weed person at anything, but I thought some of those convictions, the length of the terms, and I follow a lot of documentaries. You know, I'm a true crime enthusiast. Some people went away twice as long for marijuana sales as they did for murdering somebody. Twice as long, Joe.
Oh, absolutely.
and I also think that they throw the book at people with lower incomes and lower social class, and the people who are middle class and up get a tiny percentage of the time that the poor person got.
Okay. We might have someday a episode about the statistics of conviction, because what you say has a lot of truth to it, and the way judges assign time and the way prosecutors pursue harsher sentences, it oftentimes comes down to the person, their socioeconomic background, how they respond. But needless to say, Todd is right. Like it doesn't matter if you are harsh on crime because you're a politician or you are one of these hippy dippy Portlanders who thinks that the way to get someone to stop being an addict is actually to hook them up with resources to do that. Whichever side you fall on, the one thing that is certain is a lot of people were convicted on marijuana charges, and so you had people serving time for something that was totally legal. And we're not going to make this whole episode about like, is it moral to demand labor of people in prison while they're in prison for something that's legal? That kind of like really gets into a question about society itself. We're not focusing on that today. That just happens to be our narrative subject today. So Amanda was basically in for like it sounds like what we just read was a narrative rationalization. Like we took her story directly and then just telling me like we fell for everything she said. While I was volunteering at Coffee Creek, which was the women's prison in Wilsonville.
Give some context on that. So this is a newer facility. It's 2001, and it's in Wilsonville, Oregon. It's like a suburb of Portland. It's pretty much touching Portland, right? It borders Portland, and there's about 1,600 women prisoners in there. So what's the? Is it a maximum, or is it? Do you know? I mean, what were you doing there? Are you dating over there? What's going on, Joe? Why are you?
Look, you find
what's going on.
You find wives and attention wherever you can.
Do you remember our prison letters episode?
That's why we started it. No, I'm kidding. It's not. It is a medium security prison, and it's. I was invited there because at the time I was running part of the public speaking nonprofit, like an arm of it, basically. Like I was running my county. And I was invited there because a lot of these women had trouble going through the program because they weren't being given the resources, and they had trouble sort of proving that they had done the work. They had to have basically an official of the nonprofit show up, and I at the time was that official. And
So you were doing what? You were doing public speaking stuff or communication? So what were you teaching?
Public
What were you
speaking,
doing?
communication. I was giving tips on speaking, and while they're kind of auditing their books and seeing that they were, keeping track of what work they had done. Public speaking, if you get good at communicating and you go through the program, it actually lowers recidivism rate for prisoners dramatically. So the reason I was there, it wasn't just because the program I was working asked me to do it, Toastmasters. It is because I read about how much being able to communicate verbally helps people in prison. Like it makes your likelihood of going back to prison extremely low, because instead of doing a crime, you can communicate and network with people and explain your circumstances to whoever you're talking to.
Well, I'm sure. What was it like, though? The experience for you to go in there? I mean, was it a little bit nervous? Was it? I mean, it's kind of a scary thing, right? And how are you taken in by the prisoners and the staff? Did they treat you like you were a visitor, or did they treat you like, are they cold or are they warm?
They are extraordinarily friendly. There's the sort of classic, the cliche, which is, the bars slam behind you as you're walking in, and suddenly you realize that, there's no getting out unless you get the attention of the guard who is behind the glass. I mean, like you're kind of let off the leash once you get inside. We had somebody who was a more experienced volunteer who let us in, but they're kind of left on their own. You're not escorted by a warden or something. People just kind of know who you are, that you're there to help, and that you're an official of some sort, and you're left alone. But you're kind of left off the leash. You just sort of wander the halls, hoping the person you're following knows their way there. And we went and met with about 40 women, and they were the friendliest. They were so friendly and so welcoming that I couldn't believe that other people hadn't been volunteering this whole time, just to sort of you don't get that kind of reception from other people. Like when you volunteer at a prison.
Yeah.
Like the documentary we watched about training service dogs, that woman got more fight and kickback from asking prisoners to do work than I ever saw. And I think obviously that comes down to, what program it is and who you're talking to and why you're there. And so many of them, the reason we kind of went with we could have done that narrative about anything. In the documentary about prison dogs, the prisoner was, they were kind of stuck with violent criminals. And I believe that was a choice by the person making the documentary, because by and large, the majority of women I spoke to in prison training dogs, they were drug offenders, and many of them were in on crimes that had either the sentences had been relaxed in Oregon because people realized the 3 strikes law was just imprisoning a ton of people for almost no reason. Like it was 3 strikes of prescription drugs that the doctors are handing out for free, or 3 strikes on a drug that had been legalized. So we went from an extraordinarily harsh Nixon era kind of law, and we just filled the prisons with it. I'm going to try to keep that part of my experience out of this equation too much, because we're going to be asking a lot of moral questions today. And I that's really what I wanted to talk to Todd about. The reason why we didn't just quietly nod to each other after saying, "Hey, did you see that documentary?" "Yes, I did." Neat. It's because we want to ask the question of, is it right to ask someone else to basically train a companion for someone else? A lot of these people needed the dogs. There's blind dogs. For service dogs, there are the blind dogs who, help people walk, especially if they are not just fully blind, but like just seeing impaired. You can get a dog under certain circumstances. There are dogs for seizures. You can train a dog to where if you have chronic seizures, your dog can alert you to them before you know they're happening. Your dog will come over and put its head on your chest or check on you or go for help or just comfort you. And the one that we watched the documentary for that we will link off for everyone else, they were the PTSD dogs. Veterans who would come back with extreme PTSD, they would have dogs trained to see that they are in trouble, see that they are thrashing and having nightmares, see that they are going into a fugue state or a combative state, and the dogs would distract them or alert them to it, like to raise their attention to it.
I never believed in any of that stuff. I never did, and I always thought it was nice that ex-veterans get dogs to help them, and I didn't understand it personally. Until I was kind of going through some stressful things, and I was with my wife. We were visiting a town called McMinnville, and there was this husky dog named Lola, and it was in this gift shop, and it was just such a quiet, calming. And I just remember sitting down on the ground, and it wasn't that dog that hyper, it was that real calm. Some of the huskies are just really calm, and the blue eyes. And I sat down with her and pet her, and all my anxiety went away, Joe. And I didn't forget about my problems, but I just felt better, to the point that I left the store and had to go back and sit with her some more, just because it just felt so good. I can't explain it. So I'm thinking, well, this must be how these people feel with these animals. It's just this very calming, loving comfort.
Right. You need to go back for some more Lola time.
I'm telling you, I should have stolen that dog.
Some of the other functions the dogs give, some of them are trained to like grab things from the fridge or like pull you across the sidewalk safely, or like very concrete things to measure. When we talk about PTSD dogs, Todd is totally right, which is like it's hard to get it from the outside. I actually was on a plane a couple of months ago, and I heard somebody mention a service dog, like somebody was trying to bring a small dog on the plane, and somebody complained in the seat next to me, and they were like, "What's a PTSD dog do? Why don't you just get a stuffed animal?" And when we say comfort animal, I think it kind of gets used as like we pretend like that person is soft because they need a pet with them. Like, oh, I'll just bring my comfort ostrich or my comfort horse. Like I've heard derisive comments toward it, but really what it acts as is like if you go to therapy, sometimes you'll be brought through guided meditation, or you'll be given focus. Like you'll be told to focus on an object or focus on your body. That's a big one, is you plant your feet and you ground yourself and you focus on your own body and your own breathing and things. A comfort animal isn't there because you need to squeeze something fluffy and feel better. A comfort animal is there exactly for what Todd was describing, which is it draws your attention while your anxiety is trying to tell you that somebody is going to shoot at you. Like it really provides a narrow focus for your brain to sort of like zone in on. And the reason why dogs work so well is because they are emotive. Like it's like having, I mean, just imagine for just a second, except not annoying. Imagine having like a comedian on a leash in front of you and they're constantly telling jokes. Like something that is going to keep your attention regardless, because it is just full of emotion and it is expressive.
When I went through my own addiction problems that I've had, one of the things I learned in my treatment was to pretend you had let's say Joe, pretend you had a little Joe with you, a 6-year-old little Joe, your exact twin, and you took him everywhere with you. Where would you take him? Would you take him to drug houses? Would you take him to get drunk? Would you take him to get high? Or would you protect him? And I kind of think that with these kind of dogs, I think, and there's no way to do a statistic on this, but I wonder how many lives those dogs have saved, Joe. Because people, especially I think of people with mental health issues or people who've been to war and back, that they don't want to die because they love that dog so much. They love that dog more than they love themselves and are willing to stay alive for that dog.
Oh, absolutely. Reading articles about service dogs and seeing the documentary, that comes up over and over again. People talk about not only does it allow them to have their freedom back, it it's hard to do harm to yourself when there is something that is incredibly loving sitting at your feet waiting for you to, to be better, to go for a walk or just to, to pay attention.
And vulnerable. The reason I kind of threw this idea at Joe for this show was I was watching a documentary about, and I think the reason why we see on TV and the documentaries it's always people with more violent crimes, I think 'cause that's more interesting. I think it's more interesting when someone's on death row and they're taking care of a cat.
Right.
And that's what I saw. I was watching this really graphic, HBO documentaries are I mean, you gotta turn them off sometimes. They're just a little too graphic. But it was these people on death row, and it showed these men who had done horrific things, slit the throats of mother and daughter, horrible sexual crimes, and you saw them taking care of these kind of just house cats, and they were treating them just with so much love and caring that if you didn't know what this person had done, you would think by the way they treat this animal, they're incapable of harming anyone, especially not another human being.
Okay, that's a good question. Do you think that when people commit violent crimes, is there like a is it always accompanied with a disorder?
It's a trusted question.
We had an episode where we talked about like the Hatfields and the McCoys, and history kind of found out that like I think it was the McCoys had like a tumor in their head that made them violent, and like almost all of them, it was a chronic thing. And I've read so much history now about like people who are capable of violence that, I mean, the people who are chronically violent and they do it without controlling themselves. I wonder if that is just always a disorder, like of some sort.
I think so, and I think it's I work in the construction business now, and I think a lot of the young men, I would say over 90% of them, have some mental health. There's a reason that they're doing this kind of work, and they're not in college, and they're using their bodies more than they're using their brains, and it's not just because of their age. There's something that's either trauma that's happened to them where their clock just doesn't tick the same anymore. And I think it's when you add alcohol and drugs, Joe, it really muddies this whole thing up, because then you make even worse decisions, and then you're quicker to anger when you're under the influence of drugs. And that doesn't make an excuse for it, but I think certain people, they can't do drugs because they will lash out violently. And then when you get into what their situation is financially, what they have to look forward to or not look forward to, I think so.
I also don't want this whole episode to sound like we were morally forgiving criminals. If you have violent tendencies, you should have the wherewithal and the support network to go seek help and to put in the work and fix that. You're not given a pass because you have violent tendencies and it comes from a disorder. It just means that we end up warehousing a lot of people with disorders in prisons, and then we give them kittens. not necessarily all the time. So do you want to talk about?
I'm happy for the animals. My love is, I don't have any. I have more compassion for the animals. I'm thinking, how lucky are they? They have this person who gives them the undivided attention, who would absolutely kill for them. I think that those prisoners who are death row with those cats, if anyone touched one hair on those cats, they're definitely going to get killed.
There's a part in the documentary where one of the guys is like, they're trying to convince him to let somebody else train his dog for a while. That is part of the program, is you have to take your dog to another prisoner, say, here's the command list, here's how to raise it, and they have to socialize it with other people. Otherwise, the dog basically only learns from one person and only does commands for that one person. And these prisoners, like these guys that have done violent crimes, are like, no, I'm not going to give my dog to somebody else. It could eat something off their prison floor. They may not be paying attention to it. Like they really are extraordinarily protective in an interesting way. So like, to take things chronologically, not everyone can be a trainer for these animals. in the documentary, who got a kitten? Like we'll start there. When you were watching your documentary, was there like an application process, or did they just give out kittens to anyone on death row?
No, I think there's processes for everything. You have to, talk to the psychiatrist and do the whole bit, right? Yeah, it's not. There's a process. Everything in prison's structured. Your food, what time you get up, what you do for work. There's paperwork. There's an application. So yeah, you have to, and it's an honor. You have to have the 12 months of no write-ups or whatever no disciplinary action. So it's something you could lose, and it's something that they fight to protect.
Right. I forgot to even include that part, that you have to be on extremely good behavior to get an animal in prison. At Coffee Creek, they mentioned that I believe that's where I heard that it has a reduction on your sentence, that if you do a really good job training a service animal, it's looked at as good behavior, like it reduces your time. And on top of that, it is your labor. Giving a prisoner something cute and fluffy to keep them company in their cell. We kind of want to point out that that's not what this is about. Like it's way more intense than just prisoners playing with puppies in their jail cells. The amount of work that goes into it, it's 24/7, and it's not like you just get something to pet and love on and to feed treats. It's constant because you have to train the animal to be aware of certain warning signs all the time. And you have to train the animal to, respond to them in very specific ways. And you have to train them to ignore other stimuli. So you actually, it's the opposite. You can't love on them too much. You can't let other prisoners show them constant affection. It's like when you see a service dog in the mall and you're not allowed to pet it or to give it treats. Same thing. They have very specific stimuli, very specific commands and keys, and everything in their world falls under that umbrella. Everything around them is going to fall under that, certain specific set of circumstances when they get food, when they get pets, when they get spoken to. So it is very labor intensive. It is very attention intensive, and it is a labor. The reason why these prisoners are oftentimes not washing clothes or mopping floors while they have a prison dog at the same time, it's because this is their job. It becomes, the thing they do in prison.
It would seem like what you're talking about before, what you were kind of talking about, the comfort part of it. That would be a good distraction, I think, to make the clock and the days tick by and go by faster, right? If you were busy 24/7 training a seeing eye dog, right? So you're helping people, and I could see how that could give you a real boost to your self-esteem.
Do you ever wonder what happened to the dogs that flunk out of training? Not just for this, but just service dogs in general. They don't make the cut.
Well, my mom adopted one because my sisters are both 4-H kids, grew up, and they used to train seeing eye dogs, and then they would get the ones that we would adopt, the ones that didn't make it.
That is awesome. Did they know any tricks?
No, they were the dumbest ones of them. I mean, they're you know what I mean? Because all dogs are not, like all people, all dogs are not created equal, Usually it was they're too addicted to food or something, if they see a hot dog at the mall, they just ditch their person who's blind. I said that way. So they're sweet, but they're dumb. We'll put it that way.
There's a clip of this online meme of a dog at a dog show, and they put out bowls of food and treats and things along the catwalk on either side of them, and they're supposed to walk past without a leash, without even stopping. And there's an adorable video of a dog at one of these shows that stops and eats every single dish along the way, and it is just full playtime. And you see the owners, first they're shrieking at them, no, come, stop, don't. And then they just start laughing. They're like, yeah, obviously, it's a dog.
I was in O'Hare Airport, and it was one of those really bad traffic days where there was a huge snowstorm, and flights were delayed. And I'll never forget this. So we're all in line and everyone's upset. Everyone's stressed because we don't know if we're going to get our flights even going to take off or what's going on. And they start screaming at us from the security that there's one of the dogs is going to come through, the bomb dog, and everyone needs to shut up and not pet the dog. And they're screaming at us. Thousands of us.
Yeah.
We're being scolded. We didn't even done anything yet. And this golden retriever comes out. This thing must have been friggin' 15 years old. Look like it's about ready to die. It kind of waddles through the crowd, you know what I mean? It looks like it's pretty much senile. It sniffs one lady's butt, and that was it. It walks away. And we were all just like horrified. We were afraid to even look at it because we'd been getting screamed at for 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, I don't think this dog is in its prime anymore. It could smell any bombs.
Todd, that's right on. Almost all dogs of any service type, if they don't work out, they go up for adoption. And the rate for adoption for potential service dogs for the failures is actually pretty high. Like it's not as bad as I thought it would be. I assume people would rather have mutts from the pound over a failed service dog, but that's not true. Some places charge them. I was reading a Boston article where they were charging people for mostly trained adult dogs would go for about $3,000. But the training point where they would fail is about 18 months. That when they start training these dogs, they start with, commands, they start with paying attention, they start with where they're supposed to be. Around 18 months, that's when they start like testing them for what you said, which is attention. It's can they ignore food and do their job? Can they, if they're given harsh stimuli, like one of the things they talked about in the article is shaking cans of pennies. They would make these harsh rattling noises next to them while they were giving them commands, and they would see if they actually follow through.
Well, that's a pretty sizable investment, don't you think, Joe? 18 months before you know if you're even got something. So that's a pretty big financial and time commitment. Absolutely.
And I believe that's probably why some genius at some point put two and two together and said, hey, why not offload this potential huge risk of failure, this 18-month investment, onto prisoners who effectively don't have anything better to do? And it seems to have worked as a program, like just from an outside observer who is definitely not a professional in the field. It's these people who are in prison, they go through that 18 months, and at the end of it, they have just as rigorous of a test. Like they actually have outside professionals come in and coach them through the dog training process. The coach will tell them, here's how to train a dog. Here's what you're doing right. Here's what you're doing wrong. You need to socialize the dog more. You need to train it more on these types of commands. You need to give it more time in the yard. And at the end of those 18 months, if you don't pass the professional standards of, these people working these programs, whether it's somebody who represents autism or anxiety, diabetes, epilepsy, narcolepsy, if you don't train your dog specific to that thing, and the representative who represents, if they don't think you're up to snuff, you've just wasted 18 months. Some prisons do have a system where if you trained it and the person signs off on it saying you did all the work you could and the dog still failed, then you still get your kudos, your time off, whatever your deal is for. I imagine in Texas they may not have that. They may just say, well, you wasted 18 months. And the question is, why do this? Like if you have PTSD or, an injury of some sort, or if you need a service dog, why go to prisoners for it when you could just go to like the National Service Animal Registry, or like if you can go to your hospital and say, hook me up with a service dog, what's the cost if you just pay for a service dog outright? Like, Todd, you're not blind as far as I know, and neither am I. But if you and I decide to wear a blindfold for a fashion statement and we just wanted a blind dog for fun, what do you think the cost of that would be?
I'm trying to do the math here. I'm thinking, geez, a couple of years invested. I'm thinking $5,000. I don't know.
It's about the cost of a used car, a used to new car. It's this from the National Service Animal Registry. They say the minimum is usually around $17,000, and it goes up to 40 or 50,000.
Oh wow, that's a lot more than I thought. I guess I
Yeah.
didn't really think about the financial part of it, but yeah, I mean, for that to feed and take care of, and yeah, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time too. I think it's a lot of that's unmeasurable, right? How much time the person and love the person puts into that.
Right. And when you see these grown men and women in prison cry when their dogs they pass and they are adopted by a service member, or they're given to somebody with a disorder. I mean, like, you can tell they just had their child taken away. Like, it is crazy. I mean,
Heartache.
obviously there's going
Yeah.
to be a lot of emotional investment. Yeah.
But when it's all you have, and that person relies on you. When I had a cat for 18 years, and I loved that cat to death, and I just loved her. I mean, her name was Sarah. She was a great cat, and I was traumatized by her death more so than I was when some family members have died. And a lot of it was just that her needing me every morning, for 18 years, every single morning I fed her food, and she meowed and I fed her, and I got so attached to her just from that little vulnerability and that needing thing. And she was with me from being homeless to 4,000 square foot house, and she was through all the whole things, and she was the one consistent that loved me for 18 years straight every single day. So I can see that if you're a prisoner and you're of lower social class and you haven't been loved by your parents or your siblings or your spouses and partners, to have someone love you genuinely, unconditionally, like an animal, and then you to train it and learn a new skill, and then you get that status in prison, and you have that love, and then it's taken away from you. That'd be a pretty tough divorce.
A lot of these people have kids on the outside. Like, when they go to prison, they have children. And so, I mean, not only is there the emotional component of doing that, but, like, what is that animal being a proxy for as far as love? Like, what, getting letters from your family, realizing you're not going to see them forever, and then you look over and there's, like, a small puppy in your cell, and that becomes sort of like the proxy for your love. Having that go to somebody who has a disorder, I mean, it's the worthiest of causes, but that would the amount of pain to go through to do that. I mean, I hope it's we'll get into whether it's worth it or not. I think the whole world is going to basically, like, do you feel like everybody just assumes it's worth it because prisoners, like, we value their time less? Like, yes, it's worth it because somebody who effectively would be otherwise washing laundry or pressing license plates, that this is a better service than that.
To me, in my heart, it makes me think it's healing them. It's actually rehabilitating them. And I don't know if I'm just brainwashed by they have that show on TV, that pit bull show, or the pit bull rescue, where the woman who runs it has had a tough life, and she brings guys out of prison, and she has them work with dogs, and they become part of they become parts of society because of through animals. Their communications are poor. You're going there helping people with Toastmasters. Everyone who's in prison, the vast majority of them, have communication issues. They don't get along with people on the outside. So now they're inside. And the problem with that is now they're in there with a bunch of people who don't communicate well.
Right.
Who get angrier first and don't. So I think if that answers your question, I'm rambling, but.
No, I think that's a perfect answer. I think that in a way that, working in the wood shop or pressing a license plate will not rehabilitate you, because it's just forcing you to do a job on the inside when you didn't want to work a job on the outside. I think if you hand somebody something that's going to need nurturing and raising, especially if somebody did a violent crime and suddenly they have to nurture something and they aren't used to doing that. I mean, that is at its core a very rehabilitating thing to do.
Their self-esteem booms. You can see it. They're proud of their animal, and they're proud of their training.
Yeah. There was a moment in the documentary, the veteran who came in to get his service animal, he didn't believe it would help him. He had very, very severe PTSD. and he did not think a dog would make the boom noises in his head go away. He went in and he basically got the dog, took it a few times to like, he couldn't go to Walmart or Target because there's too many people and too much noise. And he said he was able to go shopping for the first time because he had a service dog that was paying attention to him the whole time. And he used this phrase. He said that when he was in prison getting this dog, he said, "These guys are just like the guys I grew up with. The difference between them and me is I didn't get caught." And that was from a chief warrant officer.
It's I went into the Army while I was actually still in high school, and it's called a split option. So I went away to my basic training my junior summer of high school, and I came back because I got out of it and came back to finish high school and then go back and serve the rest of my time. And I do believe that. It was the early 90s when I went in, and there were people at that time that had a choice between going to the service or going to jail.
Right.
That was like the judge was giving you an option and they had to think about it. So, and every single one of those guys, and there wasn't a bunch of them, there's probably 5 of them in my company. My company's about, I think a company's 200 people, 200 soldiers. There was probably that many that I knew of. Maybe there were more. They may not disclose all that. Back then, they kind of did disclose everything. I think a lot of them regretted. I remember them saying I should have went to jail. It would have been more fun than this. So, I think when you're 17 or 18 and you're from inner city or now rural America, where methamphetamines and stuff, I think it's working at Arby's for minimum wage and selling drugs or partying. It's a hard partying, hard drinking crowd, and that can lead to criminal life as well.
Right.
So it's poor people. It's the old, rich kids go to college and poor guys go to the service.
And then it's super weird that we ask the people who didn't go to the service, who ended up in prison, could you please raise these dogs to comfort the people who came back from the service? It's just so weird. Like for this episode, I absolutely love the program. I love the dogs. I love that it exists, and I love the service it provides. But to me, the reason why I struggle with this so much is because it's asking low socioeconomic income people who went to prison instead of the military to help comfort, like use 18 months of their time to help comfort that same pool of people who came back from the service. They chose option B, and they came back, and now it's the low socioeconomic class comforting the low socioeconomic class because of what they went through. And that is so bizarre.
I never thought of it like that, but you're definitely right. It's all we got. We got to help each other out. We don't have any love or financial support from our family, so that's what we get.
Right. Your family isn't going to help you.
It sucks.
The government has cut its safety nets. They're not going to help you. Corporations aren't going to help you. So what you have is somebody from your own background handing you a puppy.
It's just not fair.
Yeah.
It's just not fair. Life is not fair. It's not even in first world countries. It's just
yeah. No, I know that I keep raising this as if it's like as if I'm trying to like poop on the whole program, but I really like it. I just think it was an interesting sort of like when I saw that comment when the warrant officer Mark said that in the show, I was like, oh, wait a second, that is very, very strange. Now I do want to correct myself just a little bit on this. One of our myths is it true? Like, what's the difference between the people in prison and those in the military? I went to a couple of sources for this. There's a New York Times article we'll link off to, which is about military enlistment numbers. And then there's also just I don't remember which college I got it from. I think it was Syracuse, but there is a study that we're going to have in our links. And basically the cynic in me sees that exchange, that someone whose time we don't value anymore because they did something violent against America gives something back to someone whose time we do value because they did something violent for America. But optimistically, we can see this exchange and see redemption and acceptance on both sides. And if you look at the stats, a lot of low-income socioeconomic brackets do end up serving. But in recent years, like within the past, decade or so, the numbers of service people who go in because their family served is going higher and higher. It is climbing. So it's interesting that it used to be, you back in the post World War II era, you would have so many people who were just like purely they were out of options, so they went into the army. Like you were talking about, you get a choice: do you want to go to prison or do you want to serve? Now we're getting into almost like legacy service, where you have a huge chunk of the people in the service are their fathers served, their mothers served, their uncles, whatever. And then a maybe an equally large chunk of people are there because they were out of options. So it's making sort of a more interesting dichotomy.
I think making your point too, Joe, is the draft for Vietnam. I mean, do you remember what the line was, right? For if you got drafted in Vietnam or didn't as a 18-year-old male?
What was the line?
If you went to college, you didn't have to go to Vietnam.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. I mean, like literally, it is a socioeconomic
that couldn't
line.
be more clear. Yeah, that couldn't be more clear, right?
So there's something I want to hit on at the end of this because I am an introvert and I feel awkward at almost everything I do in life. I've seen people especially here in Texas, I've seen people be thanked for their service. If they have like a Marine license plate liner, or they have like a bumper sticker, or something indicates that they were in the service. I've seen people go up to them at like Wendy's and say, "Thank you for your service. Can I pay for your meal?"
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You get those old guys that you got those old guys like my grandfather wears his Navy hat. You know those guys, right? They got that.
Right.
They got the whatever ship they were on, or they love that shit. Oh yeah. I go out with my guy from my church, and he's a ex Air Force, lifer in the Air Force, and we'll be sitting, and people come up and pay for our same thing. Come up and say hi to him, and like a celebrity, kind of kiss the ring and everything. I always like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how do
he's used to it. He doesn't even act surprised anymore. He just says thank you. He doesn't go gush about it. He just says
I love to see it, and also at the same time, I am one of the most awkward people in public that you can possibly have. So I might mumble something, but there are other people who are very good at thanking somebody for their service. And one of the things the reason I bring this up is in the documentary, Warrant Officer Mark Beam says that a lot of people have thanked him for his service, but this is one of the first times somebody's actually repaid his service. And he refers to, the person who trained his service dog for him. He says that he's gotten a tool that will literally reduce his PTSD, and that is a way to repay a service instead of just thanking.
Isn't that something? That's showing people that you care instead of just telling them. I really like that. You've been listening to The Reengineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, and feedback, and blog articles for each of our episodes.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.